Okay, good morning everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Planning by Groundsure. My name is Rose DeVries and I am the Marketing Manager here at InfoTrack. I'm delighted today to be joined by Maria Leivars from Groundsure. Today's subject will show the importance of buying a planning report and how it can decrease risk for property purchases. Throughout this morning, which we anticipate to take around 30 minutes, I'd like to draw your attention to the question pane on the webinar software. Please type any queries in here and we'll get back to you after the session. So Maria, many thanks for your time today. I'll now pass control over to you to progress through the presentation.
That's lovely, thank you Rose. Well, good morning everybody. My name's Maria and I'm a Strategic Manager here at Groundsure, and I would like to welcome you all to this planning webinar. Now, with regards to today's webinar, I will be covering planning, and the topics that I'll be going through are planning figures, stimulants to the housing market. We'll be looking at barriers to the housing, why order a planning search, and the reports as well. Okay, so looking at the screen now, we can see the planning figures. So these are based on the land registry price paid data. And as you can see, it's showing the number of property transactions between 2006 and 2015. Now, what we can see here are the heights of 2006 before the recession hit, and gladly there has been a steady incline in property transactions since then. Okay, so the map on the screen is actually showing you the average house price by region. So based on the average property asking price, which is £299,000 and £159,000, that's a 2.1% decrease from December 2016. Now what this is showing is that the price of the property coming to the market falls by 2.1%, which is round about £6,500, and is exactly in line with the seasonal average of the last 6 years. Now, Rightmove does forecast that a 2% house price increase in 2007. This is the 7th consecutive year of pricing increases, and a buoyant November last year indicated that upwards price pressure going into the 2017 year. Now, this is tempered by ongoing uncertainty and increasingly stretched buyer affordability. Demand was up in November in 2016 compared to 2015, and website visits were up by 9%. The actual sales agreed were up by 5.2% nationally, up in all regions except London. But supply is still tight, with new listing numbers up by just 2%, and available stock for sale per agent has actually gone down by 5%. So looking at the stimulants for the housing market, in recent years we've seen a number of stimulants introduced by the government. Now, the first one was the Get Britain Building campaign, and this was basically consistent of a £570 million investment fund for developers to actually draw on. Now, they bought out First Buy, where there was a shared equity in each development, so individuals could buy with just a 5% deposit, but it did mean that they were sharing the equity with the government. And then the Help to Buy scheme, where there was a lot of coverage in the actual media. This actually came into effect on the 1st of April 2013, and it had a significant effect as it did release a lot of pent-up demand as it removed the barrier of the 20 to 25% deposit, as the government covered the rest of the actual deposit. Now, it is my understanding that the 5% deposit may remain for new build properties until 2020, and this was announced by George Osborne in the budget before he left. This has probably acted to give the market some sense of stability and a long-term view, which is very much appreciated. One of the other things the government has done is released a lot of public land for development, and have identified over 100,000 units. Now, these are old government sites that they're not using anymore, that they would have thrown back into the pot and said that it would be more likely to see these areas to have been developed, and these areas actually offered to the developers with big incentives to actually go ahead and do that. Okay, so now looking at the National Planning Framework. So the new NPPF is intended to refocus planning policy, excuse me, is intended to refocus planning policy on encouraging growth, and therefore includes a powerful presumption in favour of sustainable development. Now, one of the core principles of the NPPF is to encourage the effective use of land by reusing land that's previously developed, such as brownfield land, provided that it's not of a high environmental value. Now, developers are to be given cash incentives to encourage them to build more homes and towns in the cities instead of the countryside, and developers of brownfield sites will no longer have to pay tens of thousands of pounds of fees under the community infrastructure levy. So companies which agree to build new homes on brownfield land won't have to provide so many council homes in the new housing schemes. There is enough brownfield land to deliver up to 200,000 new homes across the country, and schemes on this land could be ready to go out but are being held back by the high upfront capital that is actually needed. Now, this is where the availability of investment funding can unlock development, and in recent years the local authority's approach to contaminated land has been very focused on the planning regime. Around 21,000 sites that have been managed through the planning process as opposed to being designated as contaminated land under the formal definition. It is becoming more common for planning authorities to insert contaminated land conditions as standard in planning consents, and it does amaze me on how many developments went ahead with little or no consideration for the state of the land. Even up until the late 90s, early 2000s, contaminated land conditions are not always part of the stipulants on the developer by the planning department, and I've seen this on the developments as recent as 2006. Now, the NPPF is designed to be strongly pro-development, but it does not release unbridled development upon the nation, and important checks and balances will remain in place, and a clear message is being sent out to all concerned that the planning system should better support the delivery of growth, jobs and homes than it has often done in the past. And the NPPF does relate more to commercial clients who are potentially buying large areas of land with a view to developing that actual site. Okay, so why is this all important? So you could be buying or selling a property with no knowledge of how views could be altered or removed due to the development. So have the neighbours ever attempted to obtain planning permission for new build development? Are they trying to achieve permission for a basement or an extension? Are those fields surrounding the property safe from development? And why are the vendors selling? So these are all questions that do come up. Now, all of these questions probably aren't asked enough when looking to buy a property, which is important that the buyer knows about these answers before going ahead with the actual purchase. Okay, so looking at why order an actual planning search. Now, large-scale developments are not always identified in the suite of mandatory searches, such as the CON29 Local Authority search, and may only be picked up by specialist companies. Now, in any property transaction, it is heavily advised that the purchaser employs a caveat emptor, buyer aware, as all may not be as it seems when viewing the actual property over the number of weeks. Now, with a housing shortage as great as the UK's, the government and developers are under pressure to build more and more, and properties can be seen popping up left, right and centre. However, this may be at times when the future purchasers have already made an offer, and has actually been seen in the case of the Thorpe and Abbots and the Birds and Birds case, which I'll talk to you about in the next two slides. Okay, so the first case study I'd like to talk to you about is the Bird and Bird case. Now, in this case, leading solicitors Bird and Bird were found liable in a High Court for a £2 million breach of duty after failing to advise their client of a major development close to her £25 million London property. Now, Ms. Chow had paid a £2.5 million deposit on the actual 7-bedroom property in NW8, and a solicitor had undertaken a planning search which disclosed the plans for a new academy school. Now, this was looking at housing round about 1,400 pupils, and it was about 6 stories high, but yet failed to mention the matter in their report. Now, presumably the reason why it wasn't mentioned was due to the distance of the actual property, which was 91 metres away. So not only do large-scale developments such as this have a negative impact on the aesthetics of the property, there's other lasting effects such as increased noise, air pollution and traffic. Now, the actual court found that Bird and Bird had a clear duty of care to Ms. Chow to advise on the contents of the planning report that was obtained, which highlighted the presence of this planning application. Now, it was argued that Bird and Bird should have stressed the negative impact given the property's intended use ahead of the purchase, and that this represented a clear breach of duty. His Honour, Judge Mark Pelling, QC, said it was a breach of duty to say, as was said, that the information provided did not reveal anything that adversely affects the property. Now, the next case that I would like to talk to you about is the Thorpe and Abbott case. Now, in 2010, the Abbotts sold their home to the Thorpes for £625,000. Now, a seller's property information form was completed which didn't reveal anything untoward. However, after the purchase, the Thorpes were made aware of the proposals for large-scale developments in the area. Now, these proposals actually dated back to before they actually purchased the property, and it was still in the Abbotts' ownership at that time. Now, although the proposals were not set in stone, the Abbotts, who were the sellers, attended meetings, they received a public notice advertising of the developments, and even signed a petition against the development, but yet they did not disclose this information on the seller's information form. When they were actually asked two of the questions. The first one was, has the seller either sent or received information or notices which in any way affect the property, for example, from or to neighbours, the council or a government department? And the second question was, has the seller had any negotiations or discussions with any neighbour or local authority affecting the property in any way? If yes, please give details. And they probably didn't, to ensure that their property was actually sold. Now, the Thorpes took the Abbotts to court. However, the High Court was found to be in favour of the defendant and the case was dismissed. Now, the lesson to take away from this is not always to rely on the sellers to disclose all the information, and conduct your own independent research ahead of the actual purchase. Okay, so looking at why order an actual planning search. So there are two distinct important conclusions to draw from the two high-profile cases that we've just spoken about. And the first one is that all purchasers should be aware of the first rule of conveyancing transaction, which is to employ a caveat emptor, buyer aware, especially of sellers not disclosing information, and should undertake their own independent inquiries. The second is to ensure that you thoroughly read your reports and discuss any potential issues with your solicitor or search provider. Now, on the screen you can see an example of a Groundsure planning search for a property in West Bromwich. Now, there were two large developments proposed. One is for the construction of a leisure centre, including access roads, infrastructure, sewer systems, and the second application is for the development of over 360 houses and flats and an office, again with all access roads, infrastructure and sewers. Now, this information wouldn't be picked up on the standard local authority search, which only includes applications for the property in question. Okay, so if you want to be certain that the existing use of a building is lawful for planning purposes, or that your proposal does not require planning permission, you can apply for a lawful development certificate. And it is not a compulsory to have a lawful development certificate, but there are many times when you need one to confirm that the use or operation and activity named in it is lawful for planning control purposes. Now, the Planning and Compensation Act 1991 looks at rolling time limits, which are 4 to 10 years, 4 years for building, engineering, mining or other operations, 4 years for change of use of a building or part to a single dwelling, and 10 years for all other development. Now, all these time limits have passed, or sorry, once these time limits have passed, the development becomes lawful in terms of planning. Okay, so the Community Infrastructure Levy came into force in 2010, April 2010 it was. Now, this allows local communities in England and Wales to raise funds from developers undertaking new building projects in their area. The money can be used to fund a wide range of infrastructure that's needed as a result of development. Now this includes a new or safer road schemes, flood defence of schools, hospitals, other health and social care facilities, park improvements, green spaces and leisure centres as well. Now the charging authorities in England will be district and metropolitan district councils, Loughborough Borough Council, unitary authorities, national park authorities and the Broads Authority and the Mayor of London. Now in Wales, the county and county borough councils and the national park authorities will have the power to charge the levy, and these bodies all prepare development plans for the areas which are informed by assessments on the infrastructure needs for which the levy may be collected. Now the government has decided that this tariff-based approach provides the best framework to fund new infrastructure to unlock land for growth. The community infrastructure levy is fairer, faster and more certain and transparent than the system of planning obligations, which causes delay as a result of lengthy negotiations. Levy rates will be set in consultation with local communities and developers and will provide developers with much more certainty upfront about how much money they will be expected to contribute under the system of planning obligations, as only 6% of all planning permissions brought to any contribution to the cost of the supporting infrastructure. So even when a small development this can create a new need for new services, and the levy creates a fairer system, but with all the smallest building projects making a contribution towards additional infrastructure that's needed as a result of their development. So why should development pay for infrastructure? Almost all development has some impact on the need for infrastructure, services and amenities, or benefits from it. So it's only fair to say that such development pays a share of the cost. It is also right that those who benefit financially when planning permission is given should share some of that gain with the community, which is granted to help it fund the infrastructure that is needed to make development acceptable and sustainable. However, developers should have more certainty as to what they will be expected to contribute. This will be speeding up the actual development process, and the money raised from the developer contributions should be spent in a way that developers feel worthwhile, namely on infrastructure to support development and the creation of sustainable communities set out in the local development framework, and this is what the levy will do. So how much would the levy actually raise? Now the introduction of the levy has the potential to raise an estimated £1 billion a year of funding for local infrastructure by 2016. The impact assessment on the community infrastructure levy was published on the 31st of January 2011. That sets out further details. Now the levy will make a significant contribution to infrastructure provision. It's intended to fill the funding gaps that remain once existing sources have been taken into account. Local authorities will be able to look across their full range of funding streams and decide how to best deliver their infrastructure priorities, including how to utilise money from the levy. And this flexibility to actually mix funding sources at local level will enable local authorities to be more efficient in delivering the outcomes that the local communities want. So the localism bill, using new powers introduced in the localism bill, the government will require changing authorities to allocate a meaningful proportion of the levy revenues raised in each neighbourhood back into the neighbourhood. Now this will ensure that they will help to manage the impacts. It complements the introduction of other powerful new incentives for local authorities that will ensure the local areas benefit from the development that they welcome. And local authorities will need to work closely with the neighbourhoods to decide what infrastructure they require and balance the neighbourhood funding with wider infrastructure funding that supports growth. And they will retain the ability to use the levy income to address the cumulative impact of the infrastructure that may occur further away from the actual development. Okay, so now looking at the Neighbourhood Planning Bill. Now the government hopes that measures in the bill, which was announced in the Queen's speech last May, will support more house building and provide more local say over the development. Now this is what the Housing and Planning Minister said, who was Gavin Barwell. It seeks to speak up and strengthen the neighbourhood planning process by simplifying how plans can be revised as local communities change. Now, additionally, it is expected that the bill will make sure that the plans come into force sooner after being approved by the local people. And Barwell said that the Prime Minister has been absolutely clear that we need to build more homes, and this bill is the first of a number of measures to deliver on that. What we have already built is more than 900,000 homes since 2010, and now this bill will help speed up delivery of further new homes that the country needs and ensure our foot is firmly still on the pedal. We're also going further than ever to speed up the neighbourhood planning, which puts power in the hands of local people to decide where the development gets built. Now, the bill seeks to ensure that planning conditions that require developers to take action before the actual starts are only used when strictly necessary, but in a way that the measures measures sure heritage and environmental safeguards remain in place by inserting a new section into the Town and Planning Country Act 1990. Now, an explanatory note released alongside the legislation states that planning permission can't be granted subject to pre-commitment conditions without the written agreement of the applicant to the terms of the condition. The Secretary of State will be provided with the power to make regulations about the kind of conditions may or may not be imposed on a grant of planning permissions and in what circumstances. Now, these regulations can only be made if the Secretary of State is satisfied that such is necessary for the purpose of ensuring that conditions imposed by local authorities are necessary to make the development acceptable in planning, relevant to the development planning considerations generally, and sufficiently precise to make them capable of being complied with, enforced and reasonable in all other aspects. So it's in line with the policy on conditions of the National Planning Policy Framework. Okay, so actually looking at the reports now, Groundsure do provide reports for both residential and commercial, and the reports do include house extensions including permitted developments which don't require formal planning permission. It will include small projects, large projects, existing and proposed mobile maths, local information and infrastructure such as nearest hospitals, retail, bus stops. Crime statistics and education stats are important to buyers with young children, and the report also uncovers environmentally sensitive sites that could limit and inhibit development such as extensions, so it will look at national parks, areas of natural beauty and so on. Now, the plan view is for larger property or commercial sites, and it does include the same as what we've just said, but it also includes visually and culturally sensitive sites such as listed buildings, building conservation areas, and it will also cover environmentally sensitive sites, both of which could limit development, and it also includes HS2 data as well. So on the screen now is showing a section of the actual report and how it's formatted. So you can see that it clearly shows that there are 3 to 9 houses for other developments with a value less than £250,000 in the small project section. Now, it shows information in large project sections, and most importantly it will look at house extensions within the vicinity of the actual property, and it will cover radon as well. Now on the screen, this is the local amenities map. So this is showing you exactly what is around the property, and basically it's got a little, as you can see on the screen, a little graph there showing you what the actual attractions are and how far away they are from the property itself. And then we've got the same here with the local infrastructure, which is also important, and you know, it's also valuable that whoever's buying the property needs to know what's going off around them. Now, this next screen is looking at education and crime. So this will cover education as well as nursery, all the way to colleges and university. So for Key Stage 2 and above, it will provide an Ofsted ratings and exam success. One thing to note is that the education data is for the previous school year, so by the end of this year we will have the data for 2016. So schools may be inspected at other times during the year, but because the information is housed centrally, it can only be updated once a year. Now, crime information is sourced from data published by the Home Office, who in turn receive data from 43 geographic police forces in England and Wales, and British Transport Police and the Ministry of Justice. Now, it includes antisocial behaviour, bicycle theft, burglary, criminal damage, arson, drugs and other crime and other theft. It will also include possession of weapons, public order robbery, shoplifting, theft from a person, vehicle crime, violent and sexual offences. So all this information is included within the report. And all the crime rates are based on population estimates taken from the 2011 UK census. Now, caution does need to be taken when considering crime rates of city centre areas due to the very small population and household level in these areas. Now, the high reported crime rates in the city centres, and the reason for that is partly due to the relatively small resident population in relation to the transient population that migrates into these areas on a daily basis, either from work or for leisure. Okay, so looking at permitted developments now. Now, this information is included in the Groundsure planning report, but what actually are they? Now, an extension or addition to your house is considered to be a permitted development, so not requiring a formal application for planning permission. These still get logged on the local authority, and of course it is subject to quite a number of limits and conditions. Now, information can be found on the planning portal website, and it will show things like what the actual limits are, and these are no more than half the area of land around the original house will be covered by additions or other buildings. No extensions forward of the principal elevation or side elevation fronting a highway. No extension to be higher than the highest part of the roof. A single-storey rear extension must not extend beyond the rear of the wall of the original house by more than 3 metres if an attached house, or by 4 metres if a detached house. Maximum height of a single-storey rear extension of 4 metres. Materials to be of similar in appearance to the existing house, and no verandas, balconies or raised platforms. Now, this guidance reflects temporary increases to the limit sizes for single-storey rear extensions that must be completed by the 30th of May 2019. Okay, so this does now conclude the Groundsure planning webinar in association with InfoTrack, and at this point I'd like to thank you all for attending the webinar. I hope you found it interesting, and I would like to now pass you over to Rosie.
Lovely, thanks for that, Maria. Very informative presentation as usual. Now, if you are using InfoTrack, we do provide all the reports shown today, and you can view samples of these prior to ordering. If you're an InfoTrack client and would like these added to your pack, then please just let your account manager know. I'll send through the slides this afternoon for your records, and if you do require a certificate of attendance, then please let me know by return email, or my email address is up on the screen there. We also send out a short survey when you log out, and we would appreciate your input as it does help us to define future content. So thanks for your time today, everybody. We look forward to welcoming you to the next webinar, and have a nice day.